is Fred Prack, and I would like to thank Steve Kim and the Ever Young Life Canada for giving me the opportunity to talk to you again. One of the things I was thinking of, as I was thinking of what to say to you, I had an experience a long time ago when my oldest son was 2. We had gone to Saturday morning shopping in a large grocery store to give his mother some me time. So I took him out. And we were going up and down the aisles, and I saw something that interested me, and I stopped. And he was walking at the front of the carriage. And as it happened, I'd stopped so that he was right in front of a candy section. And by the time I realized it, he'd put a lot of candies in our basket. And I said no and explained to him that we were just here to shop for dinner and put them all back in the right order. And then as soon as I turned my back, the candy started going back into our cart. And I said the terrible word, no. And he threw himself on the floor and started screaming and kicking and pounding his feet on the floor. And of course, the place is filled with other shoppers, and they're all staring at me, glaring at me, thinking I'm one of those parents that just doesn't know how to raise children and should never have them. And so I lay down on the floor beside him and started kicking and screaming myself and pounding my fists. And he stopped and sat up and looked at me and then got up and walked away. And the shoppers applauded. We're constrained by what we think and how we think we should act and what we think we should be doing in any given situation. And learning that we can do just about anything if it's demanded by the situation means that we're free. So the idea is that we have all kinds of resources that we don't use because of the constraints of view of other people and our expectations on us. My grandfather's older brother, when I was 16 years old, he was back in the 50s, he made millions of dollars. And he took me aside one day and said, I'd like to give you $1 million if you will agree to a brain transplant. He said, if I had my brain with your body, I could rule the world. and of course, they weren't doing things like that back then. Whether they are now, I'm not sure. But the idea is that the perception that we have of the world as we grow in our lives, go through the life process, everything is changing constantly. And we either ride that, like surf it, or we are victims of it. And I think the question that I'd like to ask clients is, if you had your choice in any memory that you have, in any experience that you've ever had or could imagine, would you rather be a victim or would you rather be in your power? And you may ask yourself that. But I've never had anybody that's ever said victim. Out of thousands of people that I've asked that question to. Okay, so we need to deal with changes, and most people don't like changes. Little kids are incredibly creative and willing to do a whole lot of things that adults don't after about age 30. We're more looking for security, financial security and relationship security and all of that. And we're less spontaneous in our lives. And a lot of older people get irritated by little kids' energy because it's all over the place. But they would probably love to have some of that energy. And it's because they're so flexible and fluid and go with the moment. And us older folks um, aren't as flexible anymore. So we do what we need to do and what we have to do. And realizing that everything has changed, nothing really stays the same unless we put a huge amount of energy into maintaining it that way. That idea of change is inherent in every bit of information we have and that we can gather from the world. And I mean, there's just an infinite amount of information coming to us every second, as long as we're conscious. And equally, there's almost as much energy coming from inside us, but we've sort of blocked most of that. I mean, you can feel if you're sitting down, you can feel the pressure on your back of your legs and your buttocks, or against the back of the chair as well. I mean, if you're wearing clothes, there's information coming from where the clothes are touching your skin. But I mean, if you put your pants on the right way around, why do you need to think about it anymore? We just edit that out of the process. So we're constantly doing that. We talked about categorizing before. We're chunking things down more and more and more to be able to just deal with situations. You see a 2-year-old rolling a ball across the floor. They can do that for quite a while. And it's interesting to them every time. They're learning. They're getting more information and more information. We look at the kid and going, kid rolling a ball, done. We don't have to explore it anymore. And we're not really interested, usually, in what the child is going through in the process of learning about balls rolling on the floor. We do the categorical processing, and that makes life much simpler for us, except it removes us from actually experiencing directly. I know I had a friend who lived up north of Toronto in a small town and grew up there. And the family had been there since the 1800s. And he was, even though he moved to Toronto and goes back and forth, he was part of the community. His family was part of the community. But people that, sold their home in Toronto and built something up there, they were outsiders. They'd be outsiders forever, especially if they had habits or customs that weren't part of the community. And that's a way of categorizing. And categorizing implies judgments too. So we interfere with the amount of information coming in by saying this is good, this is bad. I mean, those are major categories. This is good for me, and this is going to hurt me. We need to have those kind of categories, but we also need to be beyond them. Right? There are rules to everything. Little kids in a sandbox have rules about how they're playing together, and this is mine, and you can't touch my truck, and so on and so on. They have rules about hide and seek, and they're very simple compared to the rules of chess or bridge. Right? And we learn how the rules work, and yet there are people who resist having to abide by rules. But there's some that are really, really important, like driving on the right side of the road. I'm sure that saves an awful lot of accidents if everybody abides by that. We take for granted most of the processing that happens, and there's a whole lot of it that comes at the unconscious level. I don't know whether you've ever thought about it, but if you live in Toronto and go to Montreal, it's a very different environment because people are different. They speak English, some of them, and a lot of them only speak French. And some of the people who speak English also speak French and communicate a lot in French. That has an impact. And the value system that they have there is different than in Ontario or Alberta or wherever. We have this cultural environment that we live in, and that determines a whole lot of how we respond to the world. and what information we filter out. Again, the more information we have about any situation, the more appropriately we can respond to it. And it seems like we don't do it consciously, but the unconscious mind puts together a package of resources to deal with every situation we find ourselves in because of the information that comes in that's available about the situation. So we do that, and we take it for granted. There's a problem with processing information from short-term to long-term. There was a woman who was a social worker brought a fellow into the clinic who had had a head injury. And we talked for half an hour, and he participated in the conversation like anybody else would have. And then he said, "Is there a washroom?" And I said, "Yes, it's just out that door. Turn right, it's the first door on your left." And a few minutes went by, and his social worker, who was my friend, went over to the door and opened it, and he was standing there with his back to the door. And he didn't know why he was standing there, and he didn't know where he was, because the answer to the question was in short-term memory, and it lasted maybe 90 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, and then was gone. So he may have still needed to go to the bathroom, but he had no idea where that was. We do that. We do things like that all the time. Except we do it with our own volition, not from head injuries, well, sometimes, but not usually from head injuries. We do that because we don't want to know something. We don't want to have responsibility for something. And the difficulty is that the patterned activity in the brain can slow down as time goes by. The brain uses up most of the sugar, most of the proteins that we eat, take in. It's highly effective but inefficient in processing the food that we have. So we can help our brains support what we want, support the choices we make by giving them more oxygen and more nutrients. That means eating properly. But for the oxygen, we need to also exercise the heart. And one of the best exercises is just simple walking. And if you walk for 10 or 20 minutes, that's good exercise for a day. If you push it a little and walk faster, then what happens is the heart really starts to pump. The heart, in doing that, gets stronger and is able to pump more energy or more blood up into the brain. And so that nourishes the brain. It helps it to function. There are a lot of people that just sit around, and it's too much effort to get up and do things, like go for a walk. But if you know that it's good for your brain and you're tired of having a foggy brain, then you can do a little walking. And if you've got any medical issues, then make sure you check out with your doctor whether it's okay for you to do the exercise. And if you're starting from scratch, you haven't exercised for a long time, then just like you move around your house or your apartment, start out with that speed, and then just keep it up for a little bit longer than you normally would. And this is with the doctor's permission. And then if you want, you can just go a little faster and a little faster. And if it feels good, then the next time do it a little bit more, a little longer, a little faster. And you'll find that you will start to feel benefits. And the most important thing is that it's not a competition with anybody, including yourself. You're not trying to get to a fast walk really quickly. You work up to it slowly. And that way, you won't be stressing your system. you'll just be increasing the ability of the body to do what it needs to do to support that. If you just decide you're going to go for a mile run, then good luck. Keep 911 available. We want to avoid that. So a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit is the best way. And before long, you'll be walking around the block quite quickly and feeling really good about it as a result of it. So try that. I'm sure you'll like it, and your body will really appreciate it. So have a good day, and I hope you're well, and stay happy. Thank you.